Hey everybody, welcome back to Retro Modding News, my weekly video where I talk about what's new and upcoming in the world of retro console modding. Before we get started, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, PCBWay. PCBWay is a custom PCB manufacturer. I talk a lot about retro console mods that need custom PCBs that usually you can't buy anywhere. Well, PCBWay makes it easy for you to order those custom PCBs so that you can build those mods yourself. They have affordable pricing and fast turnaround time, so you don't have to wait long for your custom PCBs to come in the mail. They also provide 3D printing services, so if you don't have your own, they've got you covered. And if you're a mod developer, they provide CNC machining and injection molding services if you're looking to create a professional looking product. Thanks again to PCBWay for sponsoring this video. You can find out more about them in the link in the description below. First up this week is a shout out to Jeff Chen. He begged me for the shout out on Twitter. So this is the Blaster spelled with an 8 for the RGB Blaster. It's an 8-pin mini DIN adapter for Krix's RGB Blaster, which is a no mod way of getting RGB output from a Famicom. Let's just check out the GitHub for the project here, and I think it's this little darker gray thing. It plugs into the Genesis port on the RGB Blaster, and then he has his other VGA to 8-pin DIN connector on the other end into a VGA cable. I'm sorry, Jeff, but this is super extra. I think he made this so he wouldn't have to make a separate RGB to VGA adapter, kind of like with all the other adapters he's got. This way you could just reuse the 8-pin mini DIN or NES RGB style mini DIN and just reuse that adapter with this thing. I think he's also made it so if you have the original batch of RGB blasters that have weird video output where the signal is too high, I think you can do the fix externally with this mod instead of opening up your RGB blaster and modding it on the inside. But it is nice if you have a newer batch or if you've done those fixes to your RGB blaster yourself, you can just close a jumper and then it bypasses the fixes altogether. So pretty interesting adapter, and I like Jeff's creativity of incorporating that RGB blaster fix inside of here if you don't want to open up your expensive RGB blaster to do the suggested batch 1 fixes. Speaking of Krix, we have a first look at this expansion board for the Turbo EverDrive Pro. There are a couple of expansion board mods already out there, like the Spark Plug, that let you get RGB video from the expansion port in the back of a PC Engine. But this one is set up to work with the upcoming HuCard Turbo EverDrive Pro to get stereo output from the expansion port in the back. I was not expecting Krix to come up with expansion board 2, but it kind of makes sense because these will go hand in hand with the upcoming HuCard Turbo EverDrive Pro. I'm not sure if they're going to be sold separately or if they're going to be sold as a bundle, but I can imagine a lot of people will want to buy a bundle. That way they can get RGB output and have an EverDrive for their PC Engine. Mr. Booberry here on Twitter asked if it's going to come with a shell, and Krix answered that he's probably not going to have it have a shell, so it's just going to be a bare PCB. But I bet you somebody can make a 3D printed design, no problem. I'm curious then if that means that the Turbo EverDrive Pro is going to be released pretty soon. Next up this week is a tweet from Retro Game Restore. They've released an atomic purple and a transparent smoke faceplate for making a Game Boy macro out of a DS Lite. These are just the faceplates so that if you want to make a Game Boy macro, you don't have to cut up your DS Lite top shell. You could just replace the top with one of these transparent shells. This clear version was already available. In fact, I have one in a bin over there somewhere, but now we'll have this atomic purple and a smoke black version. And it looks like they're testing other colors here. There's this Sakura pink, like bright pink too, so that's interesting. I wonder if they're going to have a whole variety of different colors for these top shells. I think these look really awesome, and they have me excited to finally build a Game Boy macro. Next up, we have something from Todd Gill that was kind of unexpected, but now that I know it exists, it totally makes a lot of sense. This is a Commodore 64 style Mister case for the Mister. Essentially, it's a Mister case that has a built-in keyboard, so you're never really without a keyboard when you are using your Mister. I would say that that's one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to Mister. Sometimes I have to navigate the menu and the controller isn't connected or can't connect or something, and I need a keyboard to navigate the menu. So having a really solid case with a built-in keyboard with the Mister inside of it totally makes a lot of sense. That way you're never without a keyboard and you need to navigate the menu or something. It looks like it does have some spread out ports here. So there's an Ethernet port over here and an HDMI port over there. And then if we look on the inside, we can see that there's just a normal Mister stack sort of in the middle with some breakout cables going to the HDMI and the Ethernet. Here's actually a good picture with it side by side to a Commodore 64, and you'll notice that the Mister case keyboard thing is a little bit shorter, so like 3/4 the size of a Commodore. And I asked Todd if it was going to use off-the-shelf keyboard parts, and it looks like he's using some Ajaz AK33 keyboard. However, I don't know if that's the final keyboard that he's going to use for this thing. And another unfortunate thing is this is going to be pretty wide, so even though he's 3D printed it it is 306 millimeters, which is wider than my Voron bed. So unless he finds an even smaller keyboard, it looks like this is a 75 size keyboard. Unless he finds an even smaller one, then I'm not sure if it's going to get any smaller than this 306 millimeters. But hey, it looks great. It's very functional. Looks like he's using a backlit keyboard too. It has the Ethernet broken out and HDMI, so everything is all on the one side. I think this might be a contender for best Mr. Case. Next up is an update from Zaxor about Turbonanza. We already talked about ways of getting RGB from the expansion port in the back of a PC engine, but this Turbonanza mod is like an internal RGB mod, so you can use a Saturn style DIN on the side of your PC engine in order to get RGB output. Let's look at some of the photos here. So it looks like there's just 4 wires going to the actual PC engine board, but then there's this giant sort of breakout board here that has a flex cable connector here. I don't think you can see it in this photo, but that flex cable I think is a breakout to go to the Saturn DIN on the side. So you don't have to wire any wires from this breakout board thing, you just use the flex cable to go to the side of the case with the Saturn DIN. One interesting thing is that this is going to support all PC engine variants. I don't know if that means it's only going to support PC engines or if he also includes the TurboGrafx 16, I'm not sure. I think it's also going to support stereo audio from the upcoming Turbo EverDrive Pro. And in addition to RGB, it also outputs S-video and composite video. I don't have one of these yet, but I'm very excited with the progress of Turbonanza. I looked at this mod probably 3 or 4 months ago on the channel when Zaxor originally released it, and I kind of poo-pooed it, but now that I think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense, and I really don't have any hate anymore for Saturn DIN because everybody loves it now because it's the best video connector. All jokes aside, this looks like a pretty simple mod to do, and while you can't quote me on that because I don't actually have one of these yet, this might be a good mod for somebody who's a beginner modder to get some more experience with modding. Next up, we have a post from RetroTime, aka BixieWosh. They're the developer that created the N64 BlueRetro adapter thing that 8-Bit Mod sells. They have some pictures here of a prototype that's a teaser for something. I'm not really sure what these are going to be. They mentioned that they're working on GameCube BlueRetro adapters in the same style as those N64 ones, but this is something different. I can't really get a good sense of what this is going to be. It looks like there's some kind of a, I don't know, programming port over here. This is the ESP32, I think, that has the breakout antenna thing. There's a switch and some kind of a JST connector or flex cable connector. I'm not really sure what this is going to be, but if you have any ideas, please let me know in the comments below. Next, we have a new Sega Saturn BlueRetro adapter from Humble Bazooka. I seem to have tricked everybody in thinking those 8BitDo DIY Sega Saturn Bluetooth controller adapter things were new. I guess somebody said that those are from 2019 and I just never noticed them. I tricked a lot of people into thinking that those were new, but I guess they're not. Anyways, I think these adapters look really awesome and they're using BlueRetro so you can connect any Bluetooth controller to it, not just those Sega Saturn 8BitDo things. And I'm glad that Humble Bazooka is getting use of the multi-material stuff from the Bamboo Labs printers. So I guess I'll have to buy one of those Sega Saturn DIY boards and get a BlueRetro adapter for it. Next up, we have another picture from Stanislav, the developer behind the HDMI mod for the Sega Genesis. This is a picture or a render of board A for that HDMI mod. I guess there's going to be 2 different boards for this mod, so that's pretty interesting. If we take a look at the picture, it looks like it solders on the bottom of the board. I'm not really sure where this is. All you Sega Genesis gurus can tell me in the comments. It looks like it has space for 2 or 3 different flex cable connectors, and there's a bunch of fine pitch ICs going on here. I actually was able to get some more information from Stanislav. He commented on my YouTube video, I think it was last week, and I asked him if he can give me a little bit more detail about the mod. So they say the modification works with the central processor and VDP. It reverse engineers part of the VDP functions to generate digital 240p. Then scaling is applied using a video buffer. The buffer allows you to compress or stretch the picture vertically, even with 0 delay, and then all that's sent to an HDMI transmitter. And they also said, since I am only rebuilding part of the VDP functions and not the entire chip, consoles that have the 315-5313 chip combined in something else are not supported. All Genesis 1s are supported up to and including VA6. VA7 and Genesis no. So I guess that means it's only going to support Model 1s up to VA6. And that's because they're only reverse engineering a subset, I guess, of the VDP functions. At the bottom they say, maybe in the future when I can recreate the whole VDP, Genesis 2 will have output for HDMI. So that's pretty interesting, and this might be a hot take, but it kind of reminds me of the NES RGB. I think the NES RGB has some kind of of emulation to do with the NES PPU. Emulates some of the functions of the PPU chip anyways. To me personally, that doesn't automatically make this a bad mod. I guess it depends on the performance of the output. I guess if it uses most of the original Genesis and it has good video output, then I'm not bothered by it. I guess I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Does it emulating some of the VDP functions make it not original hardware anymore? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I want to give some quick updates from Merlin Shaw. They've been working on these replacement NES power boards. I was looking at their GitHub the other day and I noticed that there were some new versions of these replacement PCBs. This version is a composite only, but it uses a 5-volt USB-C input instead of the barrel jack. Then this one here is a no-cut component output for the NES RGB that also uses the USB-C 5-volt input. And it looks like there's going to be a new easy to solder DIY version, so if you just want composite video output, this might be a good beginner project for somebody to work on. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because I think Merlin Shaw is still working on these, and I'll have some more information when I have more info from them. And for the big story this week, we have a really awesome announcement / teaser from XRider. It looks like they are going to be working in partnership with Rama, who is the developer of the X-Station, which is a PlayStation 1 ODE. They're going to be working together to create an updated version of the X-Station. Last week I showed off this Delta Station, which is XRider's implementation of Pico Station. So it looks like they used that same design to make a new PCB for the X-Station. I actually think this is a really innovative solution for coming up with the PCB for a mod, as well as taking care of the mount for the SD card kind of all in one. So before with the X-Station PCB kind of sat below the disk drive where the PlayStation 1 disk drive used to be. And then you could buy Laser Bear's SD card mount, which is a 3D print that you could put in place of where the disk drive used to be so that you could still access the SD card from the top. This PCB is kind of both of those things together, and I think that's going to add up to a lower cost solution. So PCB manufacturing is relatively low cost compared to the cost of buying a PCB and buying a 3D print. There aren't any other photos for how it's actually going to mount to the PlayStation 1, but if this PCB is at the top level of the PlayStation and you can still access this looks like micro SD card adapter, then I think that's going to be an awesome solution. And the fact that they're working together with Rama is really awesome. I'm curious if this is going to be just the replacement PCB for X-Station. Like, this is what everyone's going to get when you order an X-Station. Not to say that I don't like the Laser Bear SD card mounts. I think they look really awesome, but I think this solution is just a little bit more, I don't know what the word, environmentally friendly, I guess is the word I was thinking of. Anyways, this is still just a prototype, so we'll have to see if there are going to be any more evolutions on this, but I think this is a really awesome job from XRider, and I can't wait to see more about this and the Delta Station. That's it for this week, but check out this video if you want to learn more about the new 3DS capture mod from Loopy. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.